Hello everyone and welcome to lesson 8.3A. I've entitled this video, People and Places of Brazil. This video is going to cover pages 256 to 258. People and Places. With some 200 million people, Brazil is the world's fifth largest country in population. Only China, India, the United States, and Indonesia are home to more people. About half of all South Americans live in Brazil. Now keep in mind this book is a little old, so I went and found more modern statistics to back up that actually Brazil is not still the fifth largest, most populated country in the world. It's at seventh, not we. It's at seventh currently. So question number one, which South American country is in the top 10 most populated countries in the world? That we can agree on no matter which book we're using. The book says it's fifth, but as of 2024, it's seventh, and that is Brazil. Brazil's diverse population. Brazil is a mix of several cultures. Many people have a combination of European, African, and Native American ancestry. Many are of Portuguese origin or immigrants from Germany and Italy. To a lesser degree, people came from Russia, Poland, and Ukraine. Sao Paulo, in particular, has a diverse population, including a large Japanese community. Nearly 40% of Brazilians have mixed ancestry. This is largely because marriages between people of different ethnic groups have been more acceptable in Brazil than in many other countries. The largest group of multi-ethnic Brazilians are persons with European and African ancestors. People of European and Native American ancestry are a smaller group. And now we can answer a couple of questions. Number two is a thinking question, so I'll let you think about this one on your own. Using context clues and the information in the paragraph, what do you think the word diverse means? Take a look at that. What do you think? It means varied. A lot of different types of people make up the Brazilian culture. Question 3. Nearly 40% of Brazilians share what in common with their ancestry? That it's mixed. Question 4. What has been traditionally more acceptable in Brazil than in many other countries in the world? That people come from mixed ethnic groups. The smallest multi-ethnic group in persons of African and Native American descent is persons of African and Native American descent. About 4 million Africans had been enslaved and brought to Brazil by the 1800s. Many escaped into the hinterland, the often remote inland regions far from the coast. The Africans lived there with the indigenous Native Americans or formed their own farming communities. Today, about 80% of Brazilians live within 200 miles of the Atlantic coast. After slavery ended, many formerly enslaved people left their homes and settled in other agricultural areas or towns. The Northeast, however, still has Brazil's highest African and mixed populations. They also form the major population groups in coastal cities and towns north of Rio de Janeiro. Most Brazilians of European descent live in southern Brazil. Indigenous Native Americans live in all parts of the country. The Amazon rainforest holds the greatest number, but about half of Brazil's Native Americans now live in cities. And you can see on this map how the population is spread out. Definitely a lot more people condensed into this part of Brazil, and certainly more live along the coast, as was mentioned. So now we can answer a couple of questions. Number 5, the definition of the word hinterland is the remote inland regions far from the coast. So this area in here, like in the Amazon rainforest area. Question number 6, where do about 80% of Brazilians live? Within 200 miles of the Atlantic coast. In other words, off the shore or within 200 miles of the Atlantic coast. And you can certainly see definitely in the southeastern part of Brazil, it's very, very populated. Question number 7. For most of Brazil's history, especially early history, did more Brazilians live in rural areas or urban areas? Well, we can't answer that question yet. We have to go to the next slide to answer that question. Crowded cities. For most of Brazil's history, the majority of Brazilians lived in rural areas, mainly on plantations, on farms, or in small towns. In the 1950s, millions of people began migrating to cities to take jobs in Brazil's growing industries. By 1970, more Brazilians lived in urban areas than in rural ones. And today, or when this book was published, 89% of Brazilians live in and around cities. And you can see that this graph shows that quite a bit. Question number 7, now we're ready for that. For most of Brazil's history, more Brazilian people lived in rural areas, which would be the farming areas. Question 8. In modern Brazil, do more Brazilians live in rural areas or urban areas? Now, by far, they live in urban areas around cities. Sao Paulo, Brazil's industrial center, is one of the world's largest cities. Some 17 million people, and keep in mind this book is a little old, live in the metropolitan area, or the city, and built up areas around the central city. The central city is the largest or most important city in a metropolitan area. Sao Paulo and Brazil's other large cities look much like cities in the United States. Skyscrapers line busy downtown streets. Cars and trucks jam highways in the mornings and evenings as people travel to and from their jobs. People work in office buildings, shops, and factories. Many own small businesses. Question number 9. What city in Brazil is the industrial center of the country? Sao Paulo. Question 10. What does the phrase metropolitan area mean? It means a city and the built-up areas around that city. And the phrase on number 11, the central city, is the largest or most important city in a metropolitan area. So take New York City, for example. New York City counts as the central city, but then the suburbs around that also count. Or more likely, our Chicago, Illinois has something like that as well. Favelas. Many middle-class urban dwellers live in apartment buildings. Others live in small houses in the suburbs, which are largely residential communities on the outskirts of cities. Wealthy Brazilians live in luxury apartments and mansions. Most of Brazil's large cities also have shanty towns, pictured on the right, here and here, called favelas. Favelas are makeshift communities located on the edges of the cities. Favelas arose as millions of poor, rural Brazilians with few skills and little education migrated to cities to seek better lives. These people could not afford houses or apartments. Instead, they settled on land they did not own and built shacks from scraps of wood, sheet metal, cinder blocks, and bricks. Some favelas lack sewers and running water. In many, disease and crime are widespread. Question number 12. In what type of places do the middle class people of Brazil's urban people live? They tend to live in apartment buildings. Some live in small houses in the suburbs. Question 13. In what types of places do the upper class or wealthy of Brazil's urban population live? The wealthy live in luxury apartments and mansions. Question 14. Use 3 adjectives to describe the favelas. Well, there's a lot we could use here, but we could start with makeshift. We could start with poorly constructed. We could say poor, crowded, cramped. Those would all be good adjectives we could use to describe favelas. Question 15. Why were favelas created in Brazil? Well, you had a lot of poor people that could not afford the traditional housing, so they settled on land they didn't own, and they built shacks made of stuff that we wouldn't consider for our own selves as home building things. Scraps of wood, sheet metal. I mean, just look at some of those pictures. These homes would not be, you would probably not want to yourself live in a favela. I'm guessing you probably prefer what house you live in, but definitely that is what the best they could do with the money that they had. Question 16. What are some common challenges or obstacles faced by those living in the favelas? Well, some of them don't have sewers or running water. And because of that, in the cramped conditions, disease can spread quickly and crime can be widespread. Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro have the most and largest favelas. Rio has about 1,000 of them, and you can see these pictured here. About 1 in every 3 of the city's residents live in a favela. Rio officials have tried to deal with this problem by offering favela dwellers low-cost housing in the suburbs. Many do not want to move because the long commute from the suburbs to jobs in the city can take hours. So question number 17. What 2 Brazilian cities have the most favelas? Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. Question 18. How did the Brazilian government try to help those living in the favelas? They tried to say, hey, we will give you low-cost housing in the suburbs. So they tried to offer a different way to go. But question 19, why did many Brazilians not want to do that? Because if they have these homes in the suburbs, the commute, the travel time between point A and point B can take hours with all the traffic. And so they're thinking, why would I want to spend hours in travel when I can just be close to the city and live in the favelas. Well, thank you so much for watching. I had a little bit of a meme here. I found this online. I'm not yelling, I'm Brazilian. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.